Welcome to the historic Brooklands Motorcourse Circuit in Surrey. It's the 18th of June 2000 and we're here today to celebrate the Napier Motor Carriage Centenary Rally. Below me, in the paddock here, some of the Napier cars are taking their place in the lineup, getting ready for the great day ahead.
Morning, Christopher.
Hello,
Morning.
But before the day's events begin, let's take a look back at the history of the Napier Company, leading up to 1900 when the first motor cars were built. David Napier, an enterprising Scotsman, founded the Napier Engineering Company in 1808 in Soho, central London, where he prospered, making in particular printing machinery, which was then in great demand. Inside the Brooklands Museum, Alan Vesey, founder member and secretary of the Napier Power Heritage Trust, takes up the story.
David Napier was able to design as well as manufacture his own high-speed printing presses that were needed by Fleet Street and also used by Hansard in the Houses of Parliament. Then he'd been joined by his son, James, who was apprenticed to his father at their new Lambeth works. And in 1847, after a 10-year apprenticeship, James was made a partner in the business, so D. Napier and Son was formed. His business expanded into other areas of general engineering, leading up to the Great Exhibition of 1851 in the Crystal Palace, Hyde Park, where his products were on show, including centrifuges for molasses, automatic navigational instruments for the Admiralty, and so on, with further diversification into work for Woolwich Arsenal on boring machines, bullet-making machines, and then into the most profitable area of all, the balances to be used by the Bank of England and the Royal Mint for weighing bullion and coinage. They also adapted their presses to print banknotes for the Bank of England, so that the company in the late Victorian period was working for the mints and the banks of the Empire and Europe in particular. It was with dwindling a size of works during the later Victorian period that James Napier presided, due to his number of inventions and his travels abroad, whereby the company contracted in the Lambeth works to a much smaller size. And on his death in 1895, the business was sold to his youngest son. Montague assumed control of the Lambeth works at the young age of 23 years, and with his enthusiasm for the internal combustion engine, he decided to build an automobile. It was then that his former cycling colleague, Selwyn F. Edge, visited him and had a Panhard car with solid tyres and tiller steering and a reluctant engine, which he asked Montague if he would rebuild it with these improvements of pneumatic tyres and a steering column and a Napier engine. As a result, in 1899, Edge, so pleased with the improvements, suggested that a Napier car along similar lines could be constructed, and that he would act as the agent to distribute these. So it was that in early 1900, a two-cylinder Napier car that was sold to Mr. Edward Kennard was made available for Edge to drive in the 1,000-mile trial around Great Britain, organised by the Automobile Club of Great Britain. The result of this long endurance run was that the two-cylinder Napier finished first in its class and second overall in the event.
The success of the 1,000-mile trial, where the Napier car competed extremely well against foreign vehicles. 100 years on, the Veteran Car Club of Great Britain reenacted the 1,000-mile trial. Starting on the 18th of May 2000, towards 60 veteran cars were entered in this punishing 10-day event. Keeping as close to the original 1900 route as was possible, they travelled throughout Britain into Scotland and finished in Hertfordshire. 4 Napiers entered in this special event. Chris Thomas's 1900 two-cylinder car completed the trial without a hitch and received an award for its reliability. Here he is with his wife passing through Buckinghamshire on the B4009, followed by a fascinating assortment of early cars. 1902 Napier owner and vice president of the Veteran Car Club, Johnny Thomas, tells us about his journey.
I had a super time, absolutely wonderful. I can honestly say, it sounds as though I'm bragging, but I didn't undo the toolbox for the whole journey. I didn't put a spanner on the car. And that, for a 1902 motor car, is not a bad trip. No, indeed. And my wife, bless her, she enjoyed it more than she thought she was going to. Because we have no weather protection. You might just as well be on a motorcycle, but it's very good indeed. It went well.
David Stark's four-cylinder 1911 Napier was an additional entry in the trial and performed an invaluable role as a sweeper for the older cars. However, the Trust's centenary organising chairman, Clive Boothman, and his 1902 car had a different tale. Well, back outside in the sunshine at Brooklands, all the cars have arrived in the paddock. Clive Boothman welcomes everyone.
Firstly, can I welcome you all to this wonderfully sunny day at Brooklands. Thank you all very much for bringing such a splendid display of Napier machinery. I think I can say without fear of contradiction that it's the biggest gathering of Napier cars since the war. The last big occasion was 1958, when they assembled some 14 cars in London. And by my count, we've got something approaching 24 cars here today. So that's a tremendous achievement. Thank you all for joining us. Just briefly on the organisation for today. As soon as you get rid of me, which I promise will be very quickly, the jazz band will start up. Around about 11:30, we're going to make the first cavalcade and drive around. The marshals will direct you around the site. So in about half an hour, the band will stop for a little bit. We'll get the cars going and circulate. Lunch will be about 12:45 to 1 o'clock, and it's in the Bluebird room. After lunch, there's then going to be an ascent of the test hill here for those who want to do it. Can you please see us in the next half an hour? We'll come around and make it known to us whether you want to go up the test hill or not, because some of the older cars will not want to make the run. Some of the more sprightly may well want to attempt the test hill. So please can you let us know, and then we'll know whether you're on for the test hill or not. After the test hill, there'll be another cavalcade which takes us round the site this afternoon. And then at 4 o'clock, we're presenting some brass rally plaques as a commemoration of today. And after that, you're free to make your own way or stay until the close of Brooklands at 5 o'clock. Do please buy plenty of programmes, very nice. Buy 10 if you want, have some on your bookcase as souvenirs, we have plenty. Visit the Napier Power Heritage stand here, which has got some books and other things to display. Have a wonderful day, and I look forward to meeting you all individually and looking at your wonderful cars. Thank you.
Chairman Jeff McGarry gives us the background behind today's event.
Well, of course, since the first car was built in 1900, and there was this plan to reenact the 1,000-mile trial of 1900 by the Veteran Car Club, it also followed that we, Napierians, had to commemorate the 100th anniversary of the first Napier car. So by then we were in close association with Brooklands, where we were hoping to start the Napier Museum and preserve all the Napier history. It was an ideal venue, with Brooklands' agreement, that we should hold this centenary anniversary celebration here today. And of course it's a year ago when we fixed the date, 18th of June 2000, but what a marvellous day it's proved to be. And when you look around at all these cars, it is a unique event that so many Napier cars have come together. And by the fact that it probably never be repeated again, sad though that may sound, we're so pleased it's going to be preserved on video recording for posterity to gloat over the engineering tradition that Napier founded in 1808 and carried on ever since. And the Napier company is still working today, producing turbochargers. But of course we think their finest hour was when they built the Napier cars.
And what a lineup there is today. 24 extremely attractive, charismatic and rare motor carriages. Now, Chris Thomas tells us about his magnificent car.
I may offend some people by saying I don't think Montague Napier knew a lot about car design at the stage he built this, but he was a brilliant engineer, and the car is, from an engineering point of view, extremely well executed, although, as I say, the design may be quite primitive. I mean, like the 360-degree crank, which he brought out only for this year. Now, that may sound immaterial to you, but in actual fact, what it means is the engine is exploding like bang, bang, nothing, nothing, bang, bang, and which isn't all that efficient. And the next year, they went on to produce a 180-degree crankshaft, and thus a 9 horsepower from the same block, which this one is credited with 8 horsepower. as a personal view, I think the Brighton movement is not a good thing for the early cars, because a large number of people preserve them only for that, and they go for premium in prices. And it's a typical English characteristic, like want to go to Henley or Twickenham or Wimbledon to do it, so they want to do the Brighton run. What they should be doing is driving their cars. And we do about 3 VCC main events in this year, and that can be 150, 200 miles a trip. And with a few other things, we've often done 1,000 miles in it. So therefore, to do 1,000 miles, this one-off trip, wasn't so demanding on us or the car.
Yes.
But that's how I think they should be used. And sadly, there are so many that are either in museums or collections that only see the light of day to show them off. Now, we shouldn't be showing, the cars should be with us in doing things that are practical.
Just enjoying the motor car.
That's right, that's right. I have 4 daughters, and they all drive this. I mean, I haven't driven the London to Brighton now for several years because my daughters do it, and they drive the car very, very well. And it honestly is not all that difficult. I've got much later cars than this that are much more difficult to drive. And after all, what old car has 8 gears? Admitted 4 of them would be going backwards, would be somewhat difficult to use, but a good 4-speed box, good ratios. It's a privilege to drive, which I totally accept. I mean, we're only passing trustees. After all, this car is 100 years old, and it's probably, I don't know how many actual owners it's had, but should we say over the last 50, it's had 3. And if that sequence carries on, another, but 6 or 7 owners on, and 100 years on, this car will be still going. There won't be much known about us, but the car will certainly be going.
One of 2 Napiers transported from the National Motor Museum at Bewley today was this 1903 4-cylinder racing 2-seater. The museum's chief engineer, Doug Hill, tells us about it.
Right, this car is a 1903 Napier. It's 55 horsepower. It's the Gordon Bennett car that was built and driven by Charles Jarrott in the 1903 race in Ireland. Unfortunately, he crashed it there, never completed the race. Then he took it to the Isle of Man the following year, along with the Edge car, and he crashed it showing off down Douglas Seafront. So its racing history is a bit checkered. Never really completed a race. I'm sure it has done so. The car then was used quite a lot up until the war, and in local club events and things, and did race in historic racing. And then it went to America to the Harrow collection, where it was restored, and we as the National Motor Museum, we bought the car back, I suppose, in about 1978, 1980, and it's been with us ever since. We've done the London to Brighton 3 times with it now, and it has actually been clocked on the Isle of Man about 4 years ago at 82 miles an hour, so it still can show a clean pair of heels to lots of cars of the period.
Was this the first to wear green?
Well, the story that I know, or the version of the story, is that the Irish government asked in 1903 that the cars that appeared in Ireland were painted green so they wouldn't scare the livestock so much. And so the British team did actually honour this, and Napiers were meant to have painted the cars green, and this is meant to be the first car that was known to be in British racing green. There's probably lots of different stories, just like the Red Flag Act, but that's the version that we know at Bewley anyway.
Important Trust member and Napier owner Bill Bishop has flown from Australia to attend the event.
Well, I've got 2 on the road. One's a 1914 20 horsepower, which is a 4-cylinder, similar to the ones you've seen here today. I've got a 1923 40-50, which is similar to John Malamatanios's over there. It's the youngest surviving Napier car. And I've got a trailer load of pieces, which my wife calls junk, which will one day be a 45 horsepower car, and most of the parts of a 60 horsepower car as well. So it's a 2008 project. That'll be its 100th year. So I've got a little bit of time. But it took the best part of 8 years to do the last one, so much the same time for this one.
Why did you choose Napier?
Well, I was offered a Renault and I couldn't have something French. No, They're a car with a great name for cars and aircraft engines, and as I fly aeroplanes, I know about their aircraft engines. Pizza rolls any day, but don't say it out loud. They're a good car, well-built car, pleasant to drive, and they're different. As you know, only about 100 people own one, so it's a fairly select group. I won't say outstanding, but select, yes.
In the heat of the day, the Napier Power Heritage Trust's tent was a good place to rest.
Yes, I'm as happy as a king, feeling good in everything. I'm just like a bird in spring, I've got to let it end. It's my sweetie, can't you guess?
While there is a lull in the day's events, Alan Vesey continues with the history of Napier.
The First World War curtailed the production of cars at Napier Acton Works, who then concentrated on aero engine design and manufacture. But after the war, Montagu Napier returned to the quality car market with his six-cylinder single overhead camshaft chassis, known as the T75. This proved to be the last make of Napier chassis that was to be produced. But by 1924, that limited production run had finished. And so the company spent its entire energies on producing the Lion aero engine in particular, which was the power unit chosen by a large number of aircraft manufacturers worldwide, there being over 150 applications. Led by Sir Malcolm Campbell, this power unit was chosen to power racing cars, especially those seeking to capture the world land speed record for Great Britain. Several of his Bluebirds had this engine in the 1920s and early 1930s. But it was John Cobb, the Brooklands racing driver, who also selected the Napier Lion 11A engine of 24 litres for his special endurance racing car, which we see here, the Napier Railton. Designed and manufactured at Brooklands by the company Thompson and Taylor to the design of Reed Railton, this great racing car was to provide for John Cobb and Great Britain no less than 43 world records, ranging from 1 kilometre to 10,000 kilometres. The car, with its aero engine installed facing rearwards, has a massive gearbox and superbly designed chassis with an aluminium body clothing it. This car is immortal at Brooklands because it is the car holding the outer circuit lap speed record at 143.44 miles an hour for all time.
Moved outside for the day, in the centre of the paddock, the Napier Railton has been a big attraction. Jeff Dovey, driver and custodian, tells us about the car. So what's it like driving a Napier Railton?
Well, it's very exciting indeed. I'm a very lucky person to have been chosen to drive the car for the museum. And I feel a bit apprehensive when I'm driving it, but it gives me a great thrill, and probably the adrenaline runs fastest when I switch the magnetos off and I've come to the end of a run. The feeling then is great, but while you're actually driving it, it's a bit apprehensive. But the feeling of a power that's available to you, but it's a very old car and it's got to be taken a lot of care of, so I have to go very easy with it and make sure that it lasts a long time after I've ceased to look after it for Brooklands Museum. Unfortunately, we can't run it today. My remit is to run it about 5 times a year, and between setting up my running program and and it'd been published, we got an invitation to take the car to Goodwood. So we're going to Goodwood Festival Speed with the car next week, which will be very exciting. I shall be driving it up the hill on one of the days. And Rowan Atkinson, who contributed towards the cost of purchasing this car for the museum, he'll be driving it on the Sunday. The car originally belonged to a Swiss car dealer, a man called Lucas Hooney, and he wanted to sell it on, and it was his wish that Brooklands Museum should have the first option on the car. And so a party was set up with Doug Nye and several other interested people to see about purchasing the car, and they put a package together with the Lottery Commission, and the purchase price was set at £800,000 or thereabouts, and the Lottery Commission put up 600,000. So the remainder came from private subscription, and the likes of Rowan Atkinson, Lord March, Ron Dennis, BRDC, and a whole host of other fairly wealthy people. Brooklands Friends and Brooklands Society also contributed, and luckily the bid was successful, and the car's here where it belongs and where it hopefully will stay.
Is there any special start-up procedure for the Napier Railton?
Well, yes. The car has a 3-speed gearbox without any reverse, and it doesn't have a self-starter. So it has an aircraft procedure for starting the engine. The engine has to be primed with petrol first from a pump within the cockpit. And when that's been done, then we have 4 strong men who push. And when we've got sufficient speed, I drop the clutch in first gear, and hopefully it bursts into life. And then we let it tick over about 800 to 1,000 RPM until the engine gets up to operating temperature, which probably takes 5 to 7 minutes, and then we're ready to drive off. But the engine overheats very, very rapidly, so once the engine's started, the car's got to be kept on the move for an airflow through the cooling system. It doesn't have a fan or anything on the radiator, so it overheats very readily. So that's what one of the major considerations is, if you're running it, is that you've got a clear run and you're not going to be held up. Because if you do stop the car, then you've got to rely on your crew to come to you and push start to get you underway again. So that is team effort, in effect, running this motor car. I'm the fortunate one who sits inside, and my 4 other team members are strong lads who push. The car is looked after by myself and my team, and we do minor servicing and overhauls, but anything major, or for a major overhaul, we take it to a prestigious Rolls-Royce Bentley dealership in Great Eastern in Essex, the P&A Wood, and they do all the mechanical work for us, and they are very good to us. A lot of the work is done free of charge, and we just pay for the consumables. So we're very lucky to have the assistance, in particular Andrew Wood of that company. He is the major support. It holds the ultimate land speed record here at Brooklands Museum at 143.44 miles per hour. But the most impressive record, in my opinion, is one they took it to America, to the Salt Flats at Bonneville, and they took a 24-hour record with it, and the 24-hour record was 150.6 mph.
Wow.
And that in those days was a considerable undertaking.
Admiring the Napier Railton was Gilbert Smith, who actually worked on car production at the Acton Works. I asked him when he began there.
August 1920. I came from Northfield School, Council School, and I couldn't get out of school quick enough. I always say that if you're clever, you like school, but I hated it.
So what did you do when you went to work at Napier?
Oh, I went on the engine bench, working on the T75 car, the B72 lorry, and the Sunbeam Arab engine, and the Napier Lion, doing sub-assemblies.
How long did you work at Napier?
11 years, and from 1920 to 1931. And the Labour government came in, and the first thing they did was to disarm, and half of the Napier employers were sacked. with an hour's notice. So I shall never, ever vote Labour again.
Can I ask how old you are, Gilbert?
Yes, I'm in my 95th year.
That's wonderful. That's
Yes.
wonderful.
October the 5th, 1905.
You've seen an awful lot this century, haven't you?
I have, yes. Good and bad.
And you're still loyal to the Napier?
Yes, rather, yes.
Have you had a chance to ride in one of in a Napier?
Not
Motorcar?
really, no. I don't know whether they're doing anything here this afternoon. I'd like to sit in one, but I know I can't go in that T75 because there's something wrong with the radiator.
Did you diagnose that, or were you told?
I was told. I was told by the owner, yes.
It's 2 o'clock now, and time for the power of the Napier engine to be demonstrated at the test hill. As the spectators take their place along the sides of this historic slope, the yellow flag is up for the 1908 60 horsepower 6-cylinder racing 2-seater. (11,580 cc of Napier power pushes comfortably up the hill. Effortless. Next to go is 1913 6-cylinder 30 horsepower open drive Landaulet. This car is owned by Peter Vasher and is completely original in all aspects. But just 30 horsepower and a sluggish start doesn't look good for the car. Oh dear, it's not going to make it. Down it goes for another go later. Next to go is David Stark's 1911 car. Jumping the flag, this 4-cylinder 15 horsepower tonneau is off to a good start. Now, is it going to make it? Yes, it does. Now the flag is down for Doug Hill in the green Bewley car. This is 60 horsepower, and Doug seems to be adjusting something on the dashboard to keep the power up. No problem. Now Bill Hughes' 4-cylinder car with a full load of passengers, including Gilbert Smith, who has got a ride after all. This car was made in 1911 and is only 15 horsepower. The engine you can hear in the background is the Napier Bentley getting ready for its climb. Bill is willing the car to get to the top. And it does. Next to go is Little Dorrit, the 1908 Hutton 26 horsepower racing 2-seater. Out for the day from the Brooklands Museum. A fine effort. Now the car everyone has been waiting for. Chris Williams in his Napier Bentley. Powered by the famous 12-cylinder Lion Aero engine. It's at the top already, less than 13 seconds. Coming next is Peter Golding's 6-cylinder 45 horsepower Tourer. It's looking good to make an easy climb. Now another go for the 1913 6-cylinder that didn't make it the first time. It's off to a good start. Yes, a comfortable climb. Last one of the day, Chris Thomas's 1914 6-cylinder Cunard Torpedo. The car has recently had a thorough engine rebuild. Another easy finish. The test hill event over, the cars returned to the paddock. Doug Hill tells us about Bewley's second Napier that easily conquered the slope.
We're the first one of the day to get up there with no trouble, but I mean, it's cheating really. There's some of the old cars that were trying to struggle up there with 20, 15, 20 horsepower. I mean, we just flew up there with, cylinders to spare, as it were. But, it's eminently capable, very powerful car. Well, this car is a 1907 60 horsepower Napier. They're unusual because there's not so many of them. They're quite a fast touring car. The bodywork on this car is a replica of the famous 24-hour car that SF Edge did use around this circuit in 1907, actually before the official opening of the circuit. So when we got this car at Bewley, we had a recreation of that body to show the sort of endurance racing car of the period. And this car has actually got a 5x5 inch bore and stroke, which is quite unusual, and it's a very big and very fast and powerful car, and it's still capable of 80 miles an hour, no problem at all.
And this is the one that's up for auction?
Yes, it's being sold at the Goodwood Festival of Speed, the Brooks auction, this coming Friday, yes.
Why was the decision taken to auction the car?
Well, we've actually got the 1903 Napier, and it was decided by our committee that why should we have two Edwardian racing Napiers? When we bought the 03 car, we did always put this 60 horse into question, and because the 03 car is such a famous car and it's got a proven race history, where this is a something of nothing car, as it were, although it's a wonderful car in its own right, that has definitely got a competition history that we know, so you can't have two of everything.
There is still plenty of interest in the Napier Power Heritage Trust tent. Jeff McGarry tells us how the trust began.
It all began because when Napier's closed down in Acton around about 1966-68, it was a slow closure. Many of the draftsmen, for example, were out of work and it was farewell. But after so many years at Acton with Napier's, they couldn't give up just like that. So someone said, why don't we have a reunion, a meeting tonight? And so they did. And then it was so successful, so many there, let's do this again next year is the cry. Of course, those things are quite normal, but you don't expect it to go on. But since then, on every first Friday in December, for 33 years, Napierians have met in Acton. And we regard that as the basis of Napier Power heritage, because with such a friendship like that, there's such a comradeship between the Napierian men. When Alan Vesey came along and I retired, we met there, and he wanted to write a book about Napiers. I've always been interested in Napier history and wanted to see it preserved. And so with Alan's guidance, we then gradually from 1990 set up Napier Power Heritage. And of course we formed it into a trust. We have an operating committee and we have quite an extensive membership of Napierians and others who nothing to do with Napiers but are so interested in the Napier engineering history, because it is such a fascinating history of engineering spanning 2 centuries now.
A mere 89 years old is Bill Hughes' superb 4-cylinder, 15 horsepower Colonial Tourer. Bill, can you tell me something about your car?
Yes, Deborah. In 1998, I went to Brooks's at Bewley to look at cars at their auction, and this was for sale, and the colour, I was attracted to the colour, and on the day the price, it was very reasonably sold, and I was the lucky purchaser. And since then it was in basically the condition you see it in now, although I've done a lot of mostly work of a cosmetic nature. It's been lots of fun. I've taken it to lots of shows. It attracts lots of attention, has got a lot of personality, and I'm proud and pleased to own it. It's 15 horsepower Colonial. These were, if you like, the Ford Escort of the Napier range. They were the sort of bread and butter. They were built very strong. They were used for various purposes. There were a lot of them was exported to countries like South Africa, New Zealand, Australia, and they were used for various functions. This one spent most of his life in Australia.
Get your fingers all over petrol. Yes. Updraft, almost need.
It's approaching 3 o'clock and the cars are being started, ready to begin the second cavalcade.
Don't worry about that.
And she'll just start now.
Well, I hope it will.
Got to flood the carbs first. Yeah.
Third swing.
You want to go?
No, we're all right, thanks.
easily the most awesome machine running in the paddock today is Chris Williams' Napier Bentley. I asked him about the time when he bought the car.
Why the Napier? I think it's because I saw the car here at Brooklands a few years ago, and Peter Morley brought it down with when Jenks is no longer with us, they had a 2 minute, instead of a 2 minute silence, they had a 2 minutes noise. And Peter had the car here, which I'd seen it before in action, and he asked most folk to stand back a bit. And when he did so, I walked forward rather than back, and then he lit it up and it blew my hat off and gave me raccoon eyes. And I saw it in disbelief, and I thought, wow, that is some engine. I spoke to him after, and we had a friendship from there, and I badgered him, went down to see it, and eventually managed to get the first refusal from him. And once had that, I had him on the line, and a couple of years ago he came to me at Silverstone, and he said, if you want a bike, you can have it now. And he held his hand out, and I shook hands, and that was it. And yet that evening he rang me back after we'd done the deal and asked to buy it back, as he has done on several occasions, and Peter misses it desperately. Yeah. But a very charismatic car, and hard to put into words what a 24-litre 600 bhp kick is like. It's like a magic carpet ride. 1,250 foot-pounds of torque, and it's quite an interesting ride. This is my first competition car. I used to race sidecar, motorcycle, vintage bikes. Had an accident which stopped me, and then found the need, and then this is the first competition car I've ever had, so it's a bit of a baptism of fire.
Do you ever get to open it up, really open it up?
Very rarely. On a sprint, I have a flat-out light on it. The light on the dashboard operates not only as ignition, but also when you're fully flat out. But in a general racing, it's very rare I put the foot down fully, because the next bend comes up too quickly. But on a sprint, occasionally you can get the light off, which means you've got your actual foot down, but very rarely. The car was built in the late 60s by David Llewellyn, who campaigned it briefly. Then Peter Morley ran it for the subsequent 30 years and made it as famous as it is. And it was built, it has history going back to the Sunbeam Tiger, I believe, and what have you. And then so it goes back quite a way indirectly. But it was basically built in the late 60s from a 1930 Bentley 8-litre chassis with C-type box, speed 6 rear axle and what have you, with a Lion engine that was found in a brickyard in Colchester, about to be used as a generator, which David Llewellyn bought, installed in this, and the rest's history. The reason I bought this particular car was the Railton I've seen since I was a lad at Bridge North when Roberts owned it. We used to pay regular homage. And when I saw this one, its sister sort of car, I thought that's the nearest I'll ever get to owning the car I really wanted, that mere mortals could afford. And that to me is the nearest thing. There are the only two Napier Lion-powered devices left now, I believe, on Earth virtually, one of which is used occasionally and one of which is used regularly. I'm fortunate and privileged to be the owner of one that is in regular usage and never fails to impress. The crowd love it to bits, as I did. And the Napier technology is paramount. It's had 30 years thrashing this engine on a fortnightly basis with very little work done at all, very little after 30 years and I don't know how many thousands of miles of severe usage. Yes. So a wonderful tribute to the Acton engineers.
It's 4 o'clock. Alan and Jeff are giving commemorative plaques to the car drivers and owners as a special thank you for coming to this unique event.
Lovely, thank you very much indeed. We enjoyed it very much.
Thank you very much for appearing.
Thank you very much for your support.
For you to add to your trophies, oh, there's Edges, your father.
Oh, that's lovely, Alan. Thank you very much.
Thank you for all your stories and interest and background you've given us during this event.
2,000. Oh, that's brilliant. Oh, thank you very much. What a special day I'm having. Oh, dear.
After a really hot day, everyone is going home now, and the cars are being loaded and driven away. The Railton has a tow back to the museum.
I've been in touch with Napier Power Heritage for a long time, so I had to come out. It was just something I have to do. Won't be around for the next one. Won't even be around for the next 50th, so we had to come. And it's been well worth it. Turned on the best of Napier weather. There's been a whole lot of cars here I've never seen before. And I've met a lot of people that I've only spoken to or emailed or faxed for maybe 5 or 10 years. We've now actually met each other, which makes a great change. And that's what a day like this is all about, I suppose. What else can you say? It's just a must-do thing for Napier owners. If at all possible today, they had to be here.
Jeff, how do you think the day's gone?
Absolutely marvellous. Because it's easy for me to say that, because to see so many Napier cars here has been beyond my wildest dreams. It comes up to all expectations. You know the sort of way we describe these things with great enthusiasm, because it couldn't have been better. To see all these Napier cars here, it makes you think back to the time when Napiers first started here. They didn't know what they were starting. They created the history, the birthplace of motoring history in Brooklands. Napiers were to the forefront. But those cars have survived and become dispersed. But it was Napier Power heritage that brought them all together on this day to commemorate the 100th anniversary of the first Napier car.
Well, it's been very successful. We had a really good turnout of cars. The weather's been kind to us all day. People seem to have enjoyed themselves. The lunch was great. The band played. Nobody fell over on the hill, so I think we consider it a success.
That's all from the Napier Motor Centenary at Brooklands. We'll leave you with some highlights of the day. Goodbye.